Hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. My guest today is Dave Dickman, who is the CEO at Tagger Media. Dave, what's happening today?
How's it going, man? Nice to talk to you.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. Tell our listeners a little bit about what you're up to. What do you do? Who are you? What keeps you excited? And we'll go from there.
Wow, that's a lot. Do you guys have 5 hours?
Yeah, as long as you need.
Currently, the company's based in LA. We're in Santa Monica, and we're in the influencer marketing space. We're the tech underpinning to the industry. You know, we were chatting earlier. This is a paid media execution at its core. And the opportunity is all the eyeballs quickly went to social, and marketers are trying to figure out how to leverage social media influencers and their audiences. And so enter Tagger, which is a tool to research, plan, execute, post out the campaign. So we've been around for about 7 years.
Awesome. And as we were saying in the pre-show, you went from 5 guys and a dog out of a WeWork to about 100 odd people in 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, as these things go, we had the wind at our back as a category. Influencer marketing was doing incredibly well. We brought on a lot of smart people to kind of do this brick by brick and not get too far over ourselves in terms of expansion. And, you know, we closed more business, we'd hire more people type of thing. So we raised a couple of rounds of funding last year. Prior to that, we were on a good path to profitability. But we closed an A and a B, which was colossal pain in the ass to go out and pitch for. But the bright lining there was, because it was COVID, instead of getting on planes and flying all around to pitch ourselves, it was incredibly efficient to do a lot of videos. You miss that human element of, could I work with these guys, or I like these guys on both sides. But we had a good time doing it, and managed to secure a couple of rounds.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sure that, you know, your skill set. So just for everybody listening at home, please do look up at Dave, but, you know, stints at Procter & Gamble, Katz Media Group, Walt Disney Company, Turner, Warner Brothers, you know, SVP of digital marketing and sales at Walt Disney. Like, y'all, you've had some pretty significant experience in the global head of sales, Apple, IAD, you know, like you've been in the game for a long time doing some really cool stuff.
It means I'm fucking old, Anthony.
Well, that, you know, that's what we just replaced CEO at Tagger Media.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm really freaking old. I have so many questions, but if you distill all of that wisdom, not age, into it, you know, what did you learn about doing business? What are some of the things that, like those guiding principles that have got you to that, the successful place that you're at right now, building on that experience with all those great brands and companies and opportunities?
Yeah, I think tapping your word build is key for me. If I were going to boil it down, working at large companies, matrixed or early stage, I've always been a builder. I feel like the companies I spent time at, I was always in divisions that were growing and scaling and less commoditized. So, you know, when I spent time at Turner, they were exporting CNN around the globe and Cartoon Network, and kind of jumped into that. And I mean, I would just encourage everybody. I think for me, I wasn't always successful everywhere I landed, but you raise your hand. You know, when I was at Turner, they were exporting. I was living in New York City, and they were exporting the product all around the world and needed people to already knew the company. And I raised my hand to go out to Hong Kong, and they said, well, we're not going to send you out ahead of time. Just, you know, we'll get your visa, pack your bag. So I've never been to Asia. And, you know, I was living in a shitty walk up in New York, but loved my time there and was just ready for a change. So it was an easy enough kind of tuck and roll, but, you know, raising your hand and then, you know, landing in a region that was hyper growth. We were opening offices, hiring, scaling. That's the fun part for me. And it's also hard work, but I think there's that accomplishment when you look back, you left a fingerprint or some legacy on an infrastructure or success on the business side.
I tend to find CEOs love to move fast, but sometimes they aren't always great at building the infrastructure behind them to support that sustained growth. In these adventures where you are like building something, what are some of the keys to remember to create something that lasts, not just something that explodes?
Yeah, I think you have to be self-aware enough to know, play to your strengths and where your weaknesses are, and then just bring in kick-ass people to prop you up, essentially. Or think about an athletic team, right? You're building a great team, so you don't want to bring in a lot of me toos. You want to bring in somebody in my case, who's got some operational, build the infrastructure, more analytical than I am type of scenario. And then also a lot of the international roles I've had, you need kind of the United Nations effect. You need people from all places and countries and territories because you're localizing products and moving it. So you need some expertise so you don't have that American lens on everything.
Yeah, I got that. So if we shift gears a little bit to what's happened with Kaggle over the past, 5 to 7 years, what were some of those, it's a whole different experience. It's still a growth kind of thing, minus having to go out and go for those rounds. What were some of those like key learning experiences potentially from the places that you messed up where you're like, whoa, that was kind of, humbling, or I'm still in my, learning journey that you went through with Kaggle?
I think, as these things go, you got to check your ego. It's not about the corner office anymore. I'm not sure it ever really was, but I think, going into an early stage company, at least my experience was I'm doing things I haven't had to do in 20 years in terms of basic blocking and tackling, because you have matrix teams to help tackle a lot of that. So it's chucking that side of it. And you have to really be willing to roll up your sleeves and ask questions. Influencer marketing it's new. It's a lot of 20 somethings. It's, I prefer working with a younger generation of folks just from a learning selfish reason for me. I learned a lot from that group of people. And then there's a lot of wisdom I can bring to the party, having spent time at a lot of these big companies in terms of processes and how to crunch things, but just remaining open and a lot of high energy, I think, as well, in terms of you have to clearly like the product or service or be into what you're doing, because that translates. You can't quite fake that.
How was that? Like, did you have any challenges building sort of like, hey, here's my experience and here's everything that I know that I've built on from the, they call it decades of experience. I'm sure you love that. Versus the, hey, I'm 20, I've got a way of working. And, like, how did you reconcile that? Hey, well, there's so many different generations in the workforce right now.
I mean, the nice part of jumping in an early stage company is everybody's more collegiate, meaning they're your colleagues. There's not a hierarchical, you're my boss, you're not my boss. Everybody's kind of rowing the boat. And I think it's having that level of clarity. What are your objectives for the next 3 months, 6 months, year, even? Can't get too far ahead in a smaller company. And then focus. It's about what you say no to, focusing on things. I always have a point of view on how to scale and build products and the media world. And this, having been in broadcast and cable and digital and music streaming, influencer marketing to me felt like another rev of all of those, right? It's the most complicated paid media execution. So it was comfortable to me from a thought leadership knowledge perspective, a lot of the similar stakeholders, but we're a SaaS tech platform, which I hadn't really tackled before. I worked at tech companies, but always on the media side. So it was a bit of a learning curve. I think in those areas, I tend to ask more questions and stuff I just know because I've done it forever. I just kind of lead the charge and let people know that's how we're going to push it forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you had mentioned when we first started, you're like, hey, the winds of change were kind of in our favor. Now it's 2022. Influencer marketing, it's nowhere near saturated. Obviously, there's so much there, but I think that the game is changing consistently. What do you think leadership teams, what do you think CEOs need to know about the kind of the media space right now, circles of influence, marketing generally, anything that you see that's standing out that either excites you or terrifies you?
A little bit of all that. I think ROI still rings true from a core marketer, right? They're looking at that. But I will tell you, a couple of years ago, we were having to sell the medium of influencer marketing to a lot of brand folks and agencies. That seems to have gone away. I feel like everybody's doing something in that space. So that's kind of nice maturity level. And that was another thing, when we were launching cable networks and digital sites around the world, the same thing. People didn't know what the hell that was or how to leverage it or how to tap the audiences. So dipping into some of that has really been helpful. But influencer marketing, it's held to a little bit of a different standard because I think there's some skepticism around it. But when you aggregate all those audiences and it's very specific and you find audiences that have a propensity to want your product or service, it's word of mouth marketing. It does incredibly well. So marketers, when they're measuring that investment against all their other investments, we're seeing a lot of money shifting over to influencer because it's doing quite well in terms of moving product and services.
Absolutely. I was having a reflection. So we do a lightning talk at our company every 6 weeks just to talk about something interesting. And I'm a marketing guy at heart. And I was just like reflecting on like SEO, like pure marketing, pure search engine optimization. And historically, and I don't know if this is even right, this is just my musing, was like, okay, it's done off of search. You enter what you want and Google will push it to you. And that makes sense. And my thought, just building on our conversation, was now it's not like search engine optimization, it's like user pushing. So instead of pulling the information to you,
Right.
the game is now, how can you best understand and segment your customer? So when you push something to them, it's optimized, but it's so targeted that it hits way better than anything. Am I full of shit, or does that make sense to you?
No, I think you're spot on. I would also add to that, a lot of marketers have gotten better really fast at a variety of content. So for instance, you might have your polished content. Then there might be this kind of user generated. Then there's the influencer you've hired because you like the way they're doing something to do it. I think that trifecta, that combination speaks to brand authenticity, because brands are trying to tap if it's overly packaged, the audiences are smart, they see right through it. And I think brands need to have a voice. So if you do one of those, it might look a little overproduced or underproduced. So I think that aggregation of a variety of content has been very effective. It's also interesting in a world where if you're a brand or an agency, you have your own socials, it's feeding the beast. You always have to produce content for the consumers, which can be, a little bit daunting. So there's some art and science there on how you manage what type of content, and you can optimize to see what's pulling better for you, depending on what metrics you're measuring against.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as we kind of like slowly wrap up, what are some, additionally to what you've shared, what is something you want to tell our audience? What do you want them to know either about what Tagger's doing, about your experience in leadership, your learnings, lessons from being an investor advisor? Like, the stage is yours, Dave. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, Tagger aside, before we jumped on, I was thinking what I would say to my kids type of thing. I talked to earlier about raising your hand, and, showing up is a big part of just career advice I would give somebody. I also feel like oftentimes people miss the mark in an interview, or if you're pitching your product, ask for the order. If somebody has researched your company and you have a good conversation and you're reading the room well, you should say, I really want to work here. Is there anything, try to close it out. I think that's a good in life, because I can't tell you when people don't do that. Or, if it's an opportunity you want to go after, you put together a little one-sheeter, you come in with a little pitch deck, or, whatever that is, anything extra you can show that there's great intention and enthusiasm around it, will make a big difference. I know it's much more of a candidates market right now, which I think it's shifting slightly back towards the middle. But I think that's a good, go after what you want. And if it's not what you want when you get in there, then, you renegotiate and redirect. But I do think that raising your hand and asking for what you want is really critical.
Awesome. I think that applies with everything. Like, obviously in your background in sales, the worst they can give you is no. But the best they can give you is a yes. And I think if the frequency at which you ask for the deal is only going to increase your batting average. If you ask for an upsell, only going to increase your batting average. And even with coworkers, I think like the more you ask for support and help, I mean, obviously there's politics behind there, but I think being okay to look bad. And as I was thinking of like your experience going into new markets, I've started a bunch of businesses and stuff, is like there's nobody else. Like, if you don't do it, nothing's going to happen. So you have to do what it takes, and doing what it takes is going that extra. Not like, it'll be fine if I go through the motions. It just doesn't fly.
And also, just have fun with it, which, I think the good news is today you're able to bring your whole self to work, whatever that is. If you have a young family or, whatever that is, everybody's embracing that. It wasn't always like that. And so that's really nice. I think you have to compartmentalize. It used to be you kind of punch the clock, but now everything's incorporated into how you're living. I think that's a really positive step forward in terms of going after what you want, and picking smart people you can learn from. I always, when we're interviewing people or talking to people, I try to meet somebody for a coffee or lunch or a cocktail or whatever it is, because I think you can tell a lot about someone's emotional intelligence, about can they read a room? Were they an asshole to the waiter? Like, you just pick up some physical cues, and it's not even just for sales jobs. It's just, you know, who you want on your team. If they're a solid citizen, think different than you, but just somebody you could sort of, who's smart, switched on, you could work with. And you don't have to be your best friend. It's funny when we talk about culture at Tagger, and a few folks had said it's like a work family. And there's a psychologist, Adam Grant, who does a lot of work on companies. And he had written something that resonated with me, because we're not your family, because we're not going to make you redundant or give you performance reviews, but we are your community, which is a nice pivot. It's like, hey, we're your work community. We care about everybody. We work hard together. But I thought that was an important distinction, because in a world where your employment at big companies or small companies can be tenuous just from, company structure. Right. So that community thing really resonated with me, where it takes out of that kind of family mode, because your family's your family, right? It's like your work piece is different.
Yeah, you can't choose your family.
Right.
That's why I say, like, our business is a family. Some people don't like their family, so
Exactly.
I don't know if you want to create that atmosphere.
Yeah.
So Dave, as we finish up, tell folks where they can connect with you. Where can they learn more about Tagger and join the community that you're building?
Yeah, absolutely. We're taggermedia.com. I'm Dave at Tagger Media. So very, very easy. But yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody who wants to talk about anything influencer marketing or beyond.
Awesome. Dave, I appreciate you today. Thanks for being here. Thanks for chatting, and just thanks for sharing your wisdom of your oldness, which I would never say to anybody else, but you brought it up first.
Congrats on the baby.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate
All right,
it.
talk to you later, Anthony. Bye.
Folks, my guest today has been Dave Dickman, who is the CEO at Tagger Media. So look at how you are building the community of people around you. Put your hand up, create those opportunities. In the economic climate that we're in, there are opportunities everywhere. You just have to be willing to take it. So do what Dave would do, and just put your hand up and say yes to something.
There you go. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Have a great one.